Hey, I'm Basil with Leaf and Limb, and today I want to walk you through just some of the maintenance items related to a meadow, which we actually call a Piedmont prairie. Now, I want to add some disclaimers first. This is going to get a little technical and a little site specific. There's a lot of variability in this maintenance, but if you're in doubt, you can follow a really basic 1 and 2 year maintenance regimen. In the first year, cut every 2 weeks, cut down to about 6 inches. When I say first year, I mean first growing season. In the second growing season, do the same, but a little taller, maybe 10 inches. So if you're in doubt, just run with the cut methodology. It'll keep you safe. By third year, you will most likely have a successful meadow. That said, in the third year, or even in the second year, you may decide, hey, I kind of like what's growing, and I don't necessarily want to cut it. What we're looking at right here is a second growing season meadow that was planted in an extremely compacted front yard. There were actual gravel beds, very, very challenging growing conditions, but this meadow is doing so well in this growing season that we decided we did not want to fully cut it. We want to let it grow and sort of micromanage it a bit. So I'm going to walk you through some of the micromanaging that you could potentially do in the second or third years if you're interested. And again, I want to say there's going to be a lot of specific things related to this plot of land right here, as well as this region that we're located in. There's a lot of variability between plants, so you're going to have to filter this for your site and for your region. One thing we always pay attention to is the edges. There is often a lot of weed intrusion along the edges. One of the things we're seeing here a lot, and pardon me because we actually maintained this one recently, but here's an example. We have lots of crabgrass growing along the edges. We could actually go down the line and find a lot of examples. Here's another clump of crabgrass. With these edges, you could pull out your seed heads by hand, totally doable. You can also think about just cutting your edges. We found that for many of the invading weeds, the stuff that starts out on the edges, because you think about the way the wind blows seeds in or the way that water washes seeds in, it's often the edges that take the blunt of the intrusion. So you can just think about cutting a foot in all along the border. For this site, the weed pressure is so minimal that we've actually just decided to pull them by hand. It's not, this site's actually doing quite well in terms of its weed pressure. I'll show you one spot over here. This spot has accumulated a lot of crabgrass, and we're really only worried about the seed heads. You don't need to pull the plant out. You just want to get rid of, we don't want to let it reproduce. So as long as we keep them from seeding, then we don't really have to worry about them the next year. That was actually the case for this whole meadow. We had tons of pressure from crabgrass and other grasses that we didn't want last year. We just cut every 2 weeks. We never let it go to seed, and very little came back in the interior. We are seeing them on the edges though, again, being blown in from wind and water and things like that. All right, edges, talked about that. Got the complicated method. You can pull the seed heads by hand, or you can just cut a foot in. There's another category of plants you might be noticing here, which is some of the clover. So clover is prolific, and unfortunately it's difficult to deal with. We have Dutch white clover growing here. We have some Japanese clover growing, and of course, as I want to show it to you, I'm not able to find it. Oh, here we go. This is Japanese clover. I'll just pluck a little piece out for the camera. It's a ground creeper also. I really don't like to pull weeds because it disturbs the seed bank. I really prefer to cut. So I actually just severed the base with my finger. This is a ground creeper called Japanese clover. Over the long run, many of your ground creeping plants are just going to get shaded out. So you don't have to worry about them too much. We have lots of examples of where there was immense pressure from Dutch clover in particular, and as the native plants grew up and shaded out, those disappeared from the ecosystem. So no way you can go after these different clovers. Just let them be, it's fine. They will be shaded out over time. Now, there's another category of weeds we have to worry about. They do tend to pop up sporadically in the interior. Here locally, these are things like Lespedeza, Himalayan blackberry, which are non-native and invasive. But then there's a category of plants, I would put Queen Anne's lace in that category as well. We see a lot of that. There's also a category of plants that are native, but they're not necessarily invasive, like horseweed. But you still don't want it because they can take over your ecosystem quickly. So in that case, what I would recommend is making some broad passes through your ecosystem just to look for some of these problematic plants. I'm not going to actually do that, but I will just show you one example here. Here's some Lespedeza growing up, and when I'm doing this work, I'll typically have scissors or hand pruners, and I'll just snip these out. Another thing to think about is an annual cut. You do need to do this on every single prairie or meadow, whatever you want to call it. Once a year, cut everything. If you can burn it, great. Most of the time, that's not an option. That cut is very important for allowing the new plants to come up in spring. I recommend waiting until spring to cut if you can, because if you look at these plants, many of them have hollow stems. There's places where insects are either sleeping through the winter or they've laid their young. We want to give all of them a chance to escape, but there does need to be at least one cut sometime between growing seasons. Again, I'd encourage you to stage all of your debris on site. A lot of reasons why. And one of the reasons we do this annual cut, I'll show you here, especially here in eastern seaboard, a lot of trees intruding. So look, this is a young pecan. I'm just gonna go ahead and break it since I don't want it here. Here's another pecan. Trees will overtake this ecosystem. So this is a big reason why we do the annual cuts. We don't wanna let this ecosystem turn into a forest. While we're here, I'll show you one of the little teeny tiny nuance. In this site specifically, there's a tremendous amount of runoff coming from up the hill, and that extends quite a ways. So when there's heavy rainfall, there's really massive water runoff. And what happened on this site is because of that runoff, a lot of the seed got washed down. So another maintenance thing that we'll be doing here is we'll actually be overseeding this during the dormant season and trying to fill in the back of this prairie. And now that we have more plant stabilization, we will hopefully be able to fill in this gap. In the meantime, we just keep it on a cutting regiment, and the cutting just every several weeks, just making sure that these seeds don't get a chance to reproduce. Right now they've escaped the cutting because they're kind of low. They'll get a little bit taller and we'll get them with the string trimmer. So, in summary, an annual cut on every meadow or prairie every year. You may need to overseed certain sections. If you know your plants or you want to kind of get in the nitty gritty, then focus on your borders and focus on the interiors in terms of grabbing the singular plants that you know are going to be a problem. If you're really not sure of your plants, then year one, follow the cutting regimen I outlined earlier. Ditto for year two, and by year three, you can mostly just let it go with an annual cut and you'll have a high degree of success. Hope that's helpful.